Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar, Undergraduate Success Series, Displaying Your Research, Simple Steps for APA In-Text and Reference Citations in MS Word. My name is Jesse Laris, and I'll be conducting the webinar this evening. Before we get started, I would like to make a few announcements. This webinar is being recorded, so I've placed everyone on mute. If you have a question, please feel free to use the chat function on the right-hand side of the screen. This is what I call a mini webinar and is approximately 15 minutes long. After the 15 minutes are over, I will allow 5 minutes for questions. If your question is not answered this evening, or if you have a follow-up question after the presentation, please feel free to reach out to me through the contact information listed on the screen. Also, if you have a particular webinar that you would like to see the library conduct, please feel free to forward your request to me. As I mentioned earlier, this is a 15-minute webinar and will cover in-text APA citations and reference citations. One of the things as librarians that we focus on is a concept called information literacy. And information literacy is the ability to recognize when information is needed and then have the ability to locate, evaluate, and use that information effectively. There are 5 characteristics of an information literate person that are listed on the screen. The 2 that we will talk about this evening are using effectively that information to accomplish a specific purpose and to understand the economic, legal, and social issues behind why we do it, why we do it that way. Primarily what I'm concerned with here is the idea of plagiarism and why it's so important to cite things correctly within your papers. So let's talk about some of the reasons why we cite. First of all, like I just said, is to avoid plagiarism. Whether it's intended or unintentional, if you are found in violation of plagiarism, it could mean anything from getting an F on your paper to being placed on academic probation or being expelled from the university. So we really want to stay away from that, and we really want you to be able to cite appropriately within your papers. Most importantly, though, your citations give the reader a map to the original source that you used. So it takes the reader from your paper, where you have an in-text citation, to your reference page where you reference all the information about that particular source, and then hopefully they're able to either go to the website or find the book or article through other means that you sourced. As a scholar, as someone that's working within academia, as you're pursuing your goals here of gaining a degree, by going out and finding resources to back up your claims, you're actually adding credibility to your own research. You're showing your instructor that you're becoming engaged in that academic pursuit. And it is actually part of the scholarly pursuit. So what you're doing is going out and finding different theories or possibilities and saying, from your experience, and from what's in the literature, here's what seems to work and here's what doesn't seem to work. This author says this other author says this. I would tend to agree with the second author as opposed to the first author, so on and so forth. So it's part of becoming acclimated with all of the scholarly resources that are out there or all the literature that's out there on that particular topic. One thing that I like to point out to students, and I think they miss, quite frankly, is that you are expected to go out and do research within your discussion questions. So a lot of students miss this opportunity. Again, in your discussion questions, if you're in the Gen Ed program, this is what the rubric looks like. But a lot of students want to rely on their own experience, which is fine, but you also should be backing that up with information that you've found from other sources. So as you can see off to the left or the right-hand side for an exemplary response, that the initial discussion response should compile, synthesize theories and concepts drawn from a variety of sources to support your statements and conclusions. Again, in the discussion participation for an exemplary response, that you offer points of view supported by research. And then that's encapsulated in the writing and craftsman section where it's saying information is sourced and was paraphrased. And I would also say quoted. I think you can get away with that as well, appropriately and cited accurately. So I think this is, for me, when I grade, there's about a 4-point difference between an exemplary and a proficient response. So if you've missed on those first 2, that's like a -8 points out of a total of 40 points. So it's very important to me that students go in and they make sure that they're doing research and then citing it appropriately. Here's a paper that I've received in the past, and as you can see in the body of the paper here, it was a one-page paper, that there doesn't look to be any in-text citations at all. Typically what you'll do is at least put in a parentheses the author and the year, possibly the page number if you've got that information as well. And at the bottom of the screen, what you find is that the reference section is merely two URL or links that would take a person to a website. The problem here is that the information that's in the text, I can't tell what's in the text, how that relates to the information in the reference list. I mean, what portion of that came from the student's own experience and what portion was taken from a website. At this point, I'd probably use Turnitin.com to determine whether or not some of that was actually plagiarized. And if your instructor gets to the Turnitin.com phase, you've probably gone a little too far, and they might come and talk to you. Typically what I'd say is they probably give you an F on the paper or 0 on the paper and say, you know, correct it or don't do it again. So this is what I want to help correct, is to get an understanding that you'll need an in-text citation, and then you'll also have to have a full reference citation. This is only part of what you would use as a reference citation on the bottom here. So let's talk about some of the basics. What goes into a reference citation? Well, or a reference and an in-text direct quote. I want to talk about direct quotes only because they seem to be the easiest way to get that information onto your page. Paraphrasing is great, and I would suggest that you do start paraphrasing. You know, it's a great way to internalize that information, then try to reiterate it in your paper. But a direct quote is much easier if you just want to make a statement and you want to keep that the original author's own words in your text or in your paper. So typically what I would say for a direct quote is to use according to. That's very typical. Then you list the author or authors, and then you've got the year with a comma after it, and then you use quotation marks to go around the actual quote itself. There's no period at the end of that quote. That's typically something that students will miss, but the period goes after the parentheses. So after you've got your last quotation mark, then in parentheses you will put your page or your paragraph number, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Then references for a book, typically what you'll have is the author, your year in parentheses, the title is italicized, the place of publication, and the publisher, and then wherever you retrieved it from. So here's an example of an in-text citation. This is the process that I was just talking about. So this is the textbook for the Communications 106 course. And so you would start it out by listing the authors. You say according to, you list the authors, and if you look there, it's not an ampersand, it's the and. Okay, so if it's within a sentence, it's the and. If it's in parentheses or if it's in your reference section, you use the ampersand, which is that squiggly line. I'll show you that in a minute. The question that the students were asked to answer in this particular class is, can you give me a definition of RAM for your computer? And so what I did was just go in and I copied this information. As long as I have it in quotation marks, I'm giving credit to the authors who wrote the book. And then I put my period at the end, and then I put page, period, and then G28. G stands for glossary in this case, and so it's not the actual book. They separated out because it's a textbook. Here's another way to do it towards the bottom here, where I just said random access memory is, and then I listed that information again. And then the authors would go into the parentheses. I've got the ampersand, that's a little symbol there. The year would just be separated by commas and my page numbers. All right? So that's just an example of an in-text citation. Here's an example of a secondary source. Now, a secondary source is where if you've got an article and you notice that an author, another author is listed in there and you don't have that original work of that author, this is how you would go about citing that particular source. All right? So this is an article called Great Inflation in College Classrooms, written by Tucker and Courts. All right? Now, if you go 11 paragraphs down in that particular article, there's a line that says, students appear to be more focused upon career preparation today, so on and so forth. And that was written by Martinez Miranda. And so my citation would be this: according to Martinez Miranda, students appear to be more focused, so on and so forth. I've got my comma. I don't have a year here, all right, because I'm not going to use this particular year, the 2004. I'm just going to cite the Tucker and Courts. So Tucker and Courts 2010, and because I use as cited in, that would be the first thing that you would put in there. And then it's paragraph 11. I scrolled down 11 paragraphs. I counted 11 paragraphs, and so that's all you have to do. If you come to an HTML document where the article is not a PDF, you would scroll down. If you're taking that information from a web page, that same concept applies as well. So if you went to a website and you found an article there and you wanted to put that information into your paper, what you would do is scroll down or count down how many paragraphs it is from the top, and then just do para, period, and then whatever that number is. So here are some basics for reference citations. It all depends. There are so many different variables that you might encounter that I've just listed a couple here. And at the very bottom, I have two resources. One is the apastyle.org website. The other is the Purdue OWL. I like Purdue OWL because it gives a lot of information. It covers a lot of ground as well. I think it's a very well put together website. All right, so where should we get our citations from? Well, I would say the first place you should always start is your textbook, and I'm going to show you how to go in. If you've got an online textbook through the Vital Source program, I'm going to show you how to put together a citation for that with my Communications 106 example. Second, use the course readings, either the journal articles that are also listed as readings for your course, or even your module as well. That way, what I like to say about that is it shows your instructor that you're actually reading through the information. Some reports might ask you to go out and find information in the library, which is great. I would also suggest that you use the online library. And then print materials as well, if you've got access to a local library or if you've got your own collection of materials. The last place that I would want you to go is the World Wide Web. Now, everyone says that everything's on the web, which is not exactly true. And I'm not. And if you were here for the presentations I gave last week, and you understand some of the reasonings why I think that it can be a slippery slope when you go out to Google, say, and you're doing your research exclusively there. If you do go to the World Wide Web, I wouldn't cite Wikipedia. I would use it as maybe a starting point to find other materials. I wouldn't use any .coms just because .com stands for commercial, and you may have biases inherent with that particular website. If you do use Google, Google has this thing where you can type in SITE and a colon, and then you can determine which type of site or domain that you want to look for. So you can select only educational websites or government websites by using either of those two commands at the bottom of the screen there. All right, so if you have a Vital Source textbook, this is one way to cite it. Now, what I've first done is if you go in to your Vital Source textbook, you'll see a little link that says cite/link. You can click on that, and then you can tell it you want APA style, all right? And this is essentially what will come up here. But if you look at the citation that they've given us, they've got Gaskin, Graviet, Liberta, Ferret, Vargas, MCL, and S. Well, MCL and S really aren't even names, so I'm already suspect of this. Then also your title information here is not italicized, and it's all uppercase except for in and here. So we really need to be careful with that. So what I've done at the bottom of the screen here is show you exactly what an APA-style citation would look like. So you've got the first author listed, and what I did instead of using these other authors listed here, I just went with who is on the front cover of the book or who's on the title page. And luckily it gives me their first initial so I can add them. So you would have their last name, comma, first initial with a period, comma, last name, so on and so forth, and then a period using the ampersand, the period at the end. You have your year. And then you have the goal all-in-one information here. So of every sentence that started here, I have capitalized. So I have the G in go, the A in all, the C in computer, and nothing else. Then because this is the first edition of the book, I left that as is, and it's not superscript with the ST. You have to have that just regular. And then here's the piece that's different from most citations. If you have a particular version of an electronic textbook, whether it's or an electronic book, excuse me, whether it's Kindle or something else, you'll want to make a note of that in brackets. So in brackets, I have vital source version. If you're using an electronic textbook, you don't have to have the place of publication. I like to include it anyway. And then you just have retrieved from and then the URL where you retrieved it from. All right, so wrapping it up, we talked about why we cite. It's to give a roadmap, to give credibility, and to avoid plagiarism. Talked a little bit about, for the Gen Ed program, that research and citing are integral for the discussion rubrics. A citation is comprised of two parts. There's the in-text citation, which is typically a parenthetical reference, and then also a references page. And you can't just put either the URL within the text of your paper or in the references section. You need to have more information, like the author, the title, the year, so on and so forth. In-text citations consist of a simple formula, which I've got at the end of this presentation. I'll show you that real quick. What I'm gonna do is, after we're done this evening, I will email out tomorrow all the presentations that I've conducted this evening, as well as the information that goes along with those presentations. So I'm also recording this, so I'm going to send everyone the URL for the YouTube video that goes along with this. All right, and then lastly, ensure that you are citing from credible sources, not .com websites or blogs. Typically, I'll get students going out and finding blog references and putting them in their paper, but essentially a blog is typically someone else's experience, and if they aren't credible, if they don't have the credentials behind them, it's really not something that you want to use in a scholarly paper. So this is the page that you will get a quick formula for putting together an APA reference in-text citation. We've kind of gone over it a couple times, but this is just another iteration of that particular what we talked about earlier. All right, so at this time what I will do is open it up